So use extra, extra virgin olive oil. It's 100% pure, like me.
Hay buried it, pulled it from the air, and acted like it never existed. One episode of Married with Children was deemed too much, even for a show known for pushing limits. 4 decades, it stayed hidden, never broadcast, never released. Now, it's back. What made this episode so extreme that it couldn't air in the 1990s? Why did it cross a line that even the network wouldn't tolerate? This is the lost episode they tried to erase, one that tested the limits of TV then, and still raises eyebrows today. Here's what they didn't want you to see. The sitcom that broke all rules in the late 1980s, American television was dominated by sanitized family comedies. Shows like Full House, The Cosby Show, and Family Ties painted portraits of loving, well-adjusted families facing minor struggles that were neatly resolved in 22 minutes. It was a formula audiences were used to, but it was also one that many were beginning to tire of. Enter Married with Children, a gleefully subversive sitcom that did more than break the mold. It torched it, danced on the ashes, and handed viewers something they'd never seen before. Premiering in 1987 on the then-fledgling Fox network, Married with Children flipped the American sitcom on its head. Al Bundy wasn't a sensitive dad trying to understand his kids. He was a bitter shoe salesman who hated his job, loathed his marriage, and constantly dreamed of the life he never had. Peg wasn't the doting housewife, she was a chain-watching TV addict who rarely cooked, never cleaned, and lived for shopping sprees. Their kids, Kelly and Bud, weren't adorable troublemakers. They were selfish, conniving, and proudly lazy. And that was exactly the point. Right from the very first episode, Married with Children broadcast the clear message. This is not a show about idealized families, but about dysfunction and disappointment, and the kind of brutal honesty in which no one had dared to venture before in primetime comedy. No soft piano music moments, no moral signs at the end. Just fat jokes, dirty jokes, poverty jokes, and unapologetic tone that dared audiences to laugh at things polite society pretended not to see. There were a million laughs. The show became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight. It became the voice of a cynical working-class humor that for many Americans felt almost palpable. Al Bundy's tirades against miserable customers and his one-minute glory from high school football hit home. Peg refusing to live up to an obedient housewife felt like rebellion in disguise. Bud's naughty one-liners and Kelly's blissful ignorance are exaggerated, but strangely believable. And that, their greatest strength, mocked everyone, men, women, children, neighbors, and especially themselves, made the whole program really interesting. But that same sharp edge, which made Married with Children one of the most prized TV shows, is also the sharp edge that made it one of the most controversial shows on television. Critics derided it as crude and irresponsible. Religious groups protested its subject matter. Politicians spoke of it as a case in point of cultural decline. Network censors? They were always on the alert. Scripts were often flagged. Jokes were rewritten. CQ cut. Still, every single week, Married with Children pushed the line. But a censor, a silent gauge, was secretly embedded within the show. A prohibited guilt line guarded by chaos behind the scenes. They could make innuendos about hooking up and even dirty suggestions. However, if a storyline went too real, too raw, or too uncomfortable, it would surely risk being squashed altogether. The outrage that erupted when the script leaked wasn't just about jokes, it was about what the episode exposed. The episode they refused to air. The episode was called, "I'll See You in Court." It was fully produced during the 3rd season of Married with Children and scheduled to air in 1989. Cast and crew had no idea it would be different from any other outrageous entry in the series. It followed the standard formula. A little hooking up, a little scandal, a few wildly inappropriate punchlines, and plenty of Bundy bitterness. But this time, something tipped the balance, and when the episode made its way to Fox executives, alarm bells rang immediately. The plot sounded like a typical Bundy misadventure on paper. Al and Peg decide to spice up their stale love life by checking into a seedy motel for a romantic escape. What they don't know is that the motel secretly records guests through hidden cameras. Later, they discover the videotape of their night together has been viewed, and possibly distributed, without their consent. In true Bundy fashion, they decide to sue the motel. But instead of justice, they find more humiliation when they learn they aren't the only victims. Their neighbors, the Rhodes, went to the same motel and were recorded too. This is another courtroom drama with testaments so graphic that they step into crude misunderstanding and jokes so awkward that even devoted fans of Married with Children must wince. The show runs through the theme of intimate privacy and exploitation but does not keep a straight face about it. It is all just slapstick from there. Yet, this one came terribly close to crossing the line for the time. The subject matter of being secretly videotaped during lovemaking was not just titillating. It was loaded with legal and moral issues. A long time ago, before social media and viral leaks, when every hotel had signs proclaiming surveillance, the plot hit a nerve. Consent, voyeurism, and public exposure were topics that were seldom brought up in the TV sitcom world. This was different. Even in a sitcom where Peg regularly joked about cutting AI off, the husband was always belittling his customers. Fox was just a couple of years old as a network, still trying to claw its way into the more traditional broadcasters' fraternity. An edgy, countercultural image was the basis of its brand, but it was also heavily dependent on advertising dollars, and this episode was a landmine. Internal memos indicate that a number of ad buyers were uncomfortable with the subject matter. Advertising next to jokes about the illegal private videos just seemed too risky. Not that the network could afford to take any risks at the time. This seemed pretty much like an episode that has been graveyard. There was no announcement. There was no statement. It just vanished. It never aired in the US, and not for more than a decade was it ever included in syndication, a home video release, or a streaming lineup. For a long time, only rumors circulated. Fans who had heard of the missing episode couldn't find it anywhere. Some thought it was never completed. Others believed it to be completely destroyed. But the reality was that the episode was complete, it just vanishes. And while the jokes could feel tame by today's standards, the outrageous, in 1989, it wasn't just edgy, it was dangerous. Not because it endorsed indecency but because it played with something too close to real-world anxiety. Being filmed with consent. Exposure of your intimate life. Losing control of your own privacy. What terrified the network wasn't just what aired, it was what could have happened if they showed it. 3. A sitcom caught in a culture war. By 1989, Married with Children had become a battleground, not just for television critics, but for moral crusaders, watchdog groups, and outraged viewers who saw it as a symptom of America's cultural decay. The show's crude humor, sexual innuendo, and unapologetic cynicism were already pushing limits, but one viewer's angry letter would ignite a full-scale public campaign that ultimately helped doom the episode, "I'll see you in court." That viewer was Terry Ricalta, a Michigan housewife and mother of 4 who stumbled upon an episode while her children were watching television. The episode in question wasn't even "I'll see you in court." It was a different installment featuring the Bundys' usual cocktail of sexual jokes and irreverent banter. But what Ricalta saw horrified her. She believed the show was undermining traditional family values, glamorizing immorality, and corrupting young minds. She didn't just change the channel. She declared war. Ricalta initiated a grassroots boycott campaign by writing letters to the sponsors of Fox, urging them to withdraw advertising from Married with Children. Surprisingly, it did help. Some of the largest corporations, such as Kellogg's and Coca-Cola, dropped the show's advertisement due to her campaign. The uproar soon hit the headlines across the country. Television news channels reported on her crusade, and conservative commentators even praised her efforts. What stemmed from personal outrage morphed into a cultural movement, targeting not only Married with Children but also the very definition of what television could now be allowed to be. Fox suddenly found itself on the back foot. The network had been positioned as bold, fresh, and rebellious because it was still in competition with ABC, NBC, and CBS. Fox had also to prove to advertisers that it was more than just noise, it was marketable noise. A major scandal, portraying this announcement as more filth peddlers, becomes just bad business for the network. Executives were in complete panic mode. In comes "I'll See You in Court," with the plot centering around a couple secretly recorded being intimate, and this is exactly the kind of grenade they don't want to be handling. Irony is a pretty good word. Married with Children had already been into its third season, and had approximately a whole bunch of earlier episodes that could qualify as really raunchy. Al made some good jokes about necrophilia. Peg openly talked about sexual fantasies of hers. Kelly had been cast as the ultimate dumb blonde, and had even built entire episodes around sexual objectification of her at times. But somehow, this specific moment in the year 1989, the aftermath of public backlash, moral panic, and a pretty sensitive issue, happened to hit differently. "I'll See You in Court" was scheduled to be broadcast in this same time frame. The episode had already been shot and was dropped into the slate before Rakalta's boycott surfaced. Instantly, every shred of Cool Risk was being re-examined. The question wasn't now whether or not it would be funny. Rather, it was, will we get sued over this? Or will that get another sponsor to pull out? The legal murkiness surrounding the plot, non-consensual filming, sexual material, courtroom implications was just enough to get Fox uptight. Silently, they pulled the episode from the schedule. With advertisers threatening to walk and public backlash rising, Fox made a quiet but strategic decision: bury the episode. What the cast and crew really thought inside the studio walls, "I'll See You in Court," was just another episode on the production schedule. The cast rehearsed it. The director blocked it. The crew lit the motel scenes, shot the courtroom gags, and wrapped filming as usual. To them, it was simply another day on one of the most outrageous sets on television. But behind the laughter, no one realized that they had just filmed the most controversial, and soon-to-be buried, episode of Married with Children. In later interviews, the cast would reflect on the episode with a mix of confusion, amusement, and disbelief. Ed O'Neill, who played Al Bundy, once said he couldn't understand why this episode was the one that got pulled. After all, he delivered monologues about women's hygiene, insulted overweight customers to their faces, and repeatedly compared his intimate life to punishment. Yet none of those moments ever caused the network to flinch. Al Bundy was far from a genius in Peg Bundy. Katie Sagal reportedly found the script funny and sharp. She said the motel story was completely consistent with the show's raunchy, awkward